One of the contemporary pastors that I enjoy, his name is Francis Chan. He's out in California. And he's pretty plain spoken. He's pretty bold. And one of the things he said recently, he said, lukewarm Christians call people, or Christians, other believers, that do the things that Christ called us all to do. Lukewarm believers call them extreme. Call them fanatics. Say they're over the top and doing too much. And there's some truth in that. It's the truth of when we see someone else at work doing a job and getting praise from the boss, and we wonder why they're not praising us. I'm working just as hard as they are, right? Aren't I doing enough? There's that mindset as we look at those around us and trying to compare ourselves with those around us. And I'm thinking it's Labor Day tomorrow, so we're going to depart from talking about the church for a little bit. When I think about Labor Day, what is Labor Day for? Who's it recognizing? Yeah, people that work for a living. And it's a celebration. And right now, with everything that's gone on with COVID and everything else, if you have a job, your spouse has a job, your family is employed and has an income, this is a time to celebrate and be happy this Labor Day, to recognize how God has provided and taken care of us. And as I thought about labor and I thought about work, for whatever reason, I got thinking about Jesus. Jesus' ministry started at 30. We know about his birth. We know about when he was 12. There's an incident listed. But what did he do between the time he was 12 and the time he was 30 and started that ministry? What did he do? What was his father? A carpenter, right? He was a carpenter. He was a tradesman. He worked with his hands. And when I think about that, and I think about Jesus and the work of his hands, I think here's a fella that his hands would have been calloused and rough from the work that he did. In that day and time, it was all hand tools. You went from cutting the tree down to cutting your own logs by hand without any power tools to making whatever it was you were making. It was all done by hand. His hands would have been rough and calloused. Those hands, those rough hands, were so kind and gentle, however, in his ministry. And what I want to talk to you about today is the work of his hands. As we think about Labor Day, we think about a day to celebrate our work. I want to take today to celebrate his work and what he's done. It starts in Isaiah 48:13, just one verse. Isaiah 48:13 says, "My hand also has laid the foundation of the earth, and my right hand has spanned the heavens. When I call unto them, they stand up together." We know that all was created by him. We know from John that all was made by him. Without him was not anything made that was made. We know from Genesis 1, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. But Isaiah gives us an idea of how that happened. And the picture is this, that Jesus, with his left hand, is forming the earth, the foundation of the earth, and the right hand is casting the heavens out into space. All else, the work of his hands. There's a fellow I watch online. There's a game that he plays. What I like about it, I care less about the game, but someone took all that we understand and know about the galaxy and the universe around us, and in the game you get to visit the other stars and planets. And he is just amazed at what this universe is and what it's like. The other day he had a thing. He parked his spaceship the same distance from the sun, our sun, as Jupiter would be. But the sun he was around, the recreation, was of Betelgeuse. Betelgeuse is a supergiant. And there, the orbit of Jupiter, from our sun, that distance, the sun looked like our sun looks in the sky, maybe bigger. And then he came back to the solar system, and he parked his spaceship where Jupiter would be. And the sun looked just like one of the other stars. Our sun, which is so massive, our sun which brings life, our sun which he created for us to enjoy, to know warmth on our shoulders and on our back, to know warmth on our face, so small. This universe that he created the earth with one hand, and he created everything else with the other. What does that tell you about the work of the earth? Understand this too, by creating it in his left hand, he created it in the hand closest to his heart. That's the significance of that, in case you missed it. And then in Psalm, we go from the creation of the earth with one hand and everything else with the other in Psalm 8. And I love this psalm. He says, "O Lord, our Lord, how excellent is thy name in all the earth, who has set thy glory above the heavens. Out of the mouth of babes and sucklings hast thou ordained strength because of thine enemies, that thou mightest still the enemy and the avenger. When I consider thy heavens, the work of thy fingers, the moon and the stars, which thou hast ordained, what is man that thou art mindful of him, and the son of man that thou visitest him? So not only do we have him forming the earth with his left hand and forming everything else with his right, but it says the individual moons and stars and planets and everything else is out there is the work of his fingertips. He just put one here and one here and one here. And here you have this sun. Betelgeuse is so big, if that was our sun, there would be no earth because we would be inside of it. So huge. And we look at our sun in the sky and we see it up there and we feel its warmth on our face. We don't realize the scope of what God created. There's a pastor, we used to have to carry him. We had a competing license, Bible Broadcasting Network at Family Radio, and so they said, okay, you guys work something out. And Harold Camping was his name. I've talked about him before. And Harold had a voice, came out of the crypt, and looked like he'd just crawled out. He would talking on his talk show, and people hated that talk show. I got so many complaints, but he got on one time and he said, you know, they talk about how big the galaxies are and the stars and how huge, but I think the stars are not as far away, that they're only the size of basketballs or maybe automobiles, and that's how the stars are. And I'm thinking, you don't have a clue. The science, and you're minimizing God, that God just made this little small universe. God is beyond comprehension. Is it any wonder that his creation would be beyond our comprehension and understanding? He's made all this. And then I think, when the psalmist said, who am I that you visit me? And I think about that hand that crafted the earth, and the other hand that put all the sun, moon, and stars, and the fingers that put them all in their place, and then set it all spinning, and set a rhythm to it so it all works. It just works. And I think about those hands that created everything we see. Those hands in a manger. Pudgy little hands. Pudgy little fingers. I wonder if Mary took him out under the night sky, and there as a baby, Jesus looked up and reached up as babies do. Reached up to his own creation. Reaching as children do. Those hands that created everything were pudgy little hands one day. Pudgy little hands. To realize that those hands came to be one of us, to visit us and live above us, to be one of us. A little lower than the angels he made us, and a little lower than the angels he made himself. The timeless one, trapping himself in time, that he might live 30 years as one of us. To learn what it meant to love, to learn what it meant to be hurt, to learn what it meant to be one of us. Those hands here on this earth. Those hands that created everything. Creation, the work of his hands. 30 years after his birth, those hands healing the sick. One of my favorite stories, John chapter 9. John chapter 9 verse 1, as Jesus passed by, he saw a man which was blind from his birth. And his disciples asked him, saying, Master, who did sin, this man or his parents, that he was born blind? And Jesus said, neither this man sinned nor his parents, but that the works of God should be made manifest in him. I must work the works of him that sent me while it is day. The night comes when no man can work. As long as I am in the world, I am the light of the world. He's talking about light with a blind man sitting right there. When he had thus spoken, he spat on the ground and made clay of the spittle. And he took his hands and took that clay and put it on the eyes of the blind man. He put his hands, put the clay on the eyes of the blind man, and said unto him, Go wash in the pool of Siloam. He sent him away therefore, and washed, and came seeing. The neighbors thereof, and they which before had seen him that was blind, said, Is not he that sat and begged? Some said, This is he. Others said, No, it can't be. It looks like him, but it can't be. That guy was blind. Therefore said they unto him, How were thine eyes opened? He answered and said, A man that is called Jesus. He didn't know any better. A man that is called Jesus made clay, and anointed my eyes, and said unto me, Go to the pool of Siloam and wash. And I went and washed, and I received sight. Then said they unto him, Where is he? He said, Where is Jesus? I don't know. I don't know. He didn't hang around. They brought to the Pharisees him that had 4 times was blind. They said, Listen, you got to see this. This is a miracle. We don't understand it. And it was the Sabbath day when Jesus made the clay and opened his eyes. Then again the Pharisees also asked him how he received his sight. He said unto them, He put clay on my eyes, and I washed, and I did see. Therefore said some of the Pharisees, The man is not of God, because he keepeth not the Sabbath day. Others said, How can a man that is a sinner do such miracles? There was division among them. He can't work on the Sabbath day. He healed on the Sabbath day. He can't do that. Well, if he's such a bad sinner, how did he heal this guy? If he's so bad, how did he bring his sight back to him? They say unto the blind man again, What sayest thou of him that has opened thine eyes? What do you say about Jesus? He said, He's got to be a prophet. But the Jews did not believe concerning him that he had been blind and received his sight. It's a scam. It's a put-on. Until they called the parents of him that had received his sight. And they asked them, saying, Is this your son, who you say was born blind? How does he now see? The parents answered and said, We know that this is our son and that he was born blind. We know that. But what means he now sees, we don't know. Who's opened his eyes? We don't know. He's old enough. Ask him. He can speak for himself. He's an adult. They spoke this because they were afraid of the Jews. The Jews had agreed already that if a man did confess that he was the Christ, he should be put out of the synagogue. Therefore said his parents, He's of age, ask him. Then again called they the man that was blind, and said unto him, Give God the praise. We know this man is a sinner. The blind man answered and said, Whether he be a sinner or no, I don't know. One thing I do know, I was blind, and now I ain't. I was blind, but now I can see. Then said they unto him again, What did he do? How did he open your eyes? And he says, I told you already. Did you not hear? What, are you going to be one of his disciples? And they reviled him and said, Thou art his disciple, but we're Moses' disciples. We know that God speaks unto Moses. As for this fellow, we don't know him or where he's from. The man answered and said unto them, Why, herein is a marvelous thing, that you are clueless about the man that opened my eyes. You smart, learned, educated, intelligent people are clueless how this happened. Yet I was blind, and now I see. That's marvelous. That's wonderful. Now we know that God hears not sinners, but if any man be a worshiper of God, he does his will, and him that hears. Since the world began, this is the key, since the world began, was it not heard that any man opened the eyes of one that was born blind? That's the truth. Nobody had ever received sight. Dead had been brought back to life. Lepers had been healed. Nobody had ever received their sight before this. This is the first time. He's the first. He's the first. If this man were not of God, he could do nothing. They answered and said unto him, Thou wast altogether born in sin, and dost thou teach us? Who are you to tell us what to do? And they cast him out. I love the fact that the blind man received not only his sight, but he received his dignity. He'd spent his life begging. He'd spent his life with people like the apostles walking around saying, Why is he blind? Is he a sinner? Is that some kind of a syphilis kind of thing that he's got going on there? Because we know when you do, you can lose your sight. You drink bad alcohol, you can lose your sight. Or was it his parents? Was his mom messing around doing drugs while she was carrying him? What happened? Why is he the way he is? He's heard that all his life. And now he can see. And the people that have walked by him and every now and again maybe put a quarter in his cup, put $1 in his cup, maybe once in a while put 20 bucks in to make themselves feel good that I've been so generous to this poor man. God not only gave him sight, he gave him dignity. And God does that to human beings. When we get saved, when we receive Jesus Christ, our spiritual eyes are open and we have a dignity that we didn't have before. Because we understand our importance in the eyes of God. Go back to what is man that thou art mindful of him? Who am I that God thinks about me and cares about me? There is a dignity to being a human being. And we need to understand that. He expects us to live in dignity before him. His spiritual eyes were also open, that he recognized and realized the falsehood and the pride of the Pharisees. He recognized it. He who had been reviled suddenly understands that those that reviled him are worse than he. His spiritual eyes were open as well. And he immediately learned to trust the wisdom of God over man. How did it happen? You tell me. What did he do? I told you, he put clay on my eyes. Yeah, but that doesn't happen. We've tried that. It hasn't worked. Maybe there's more to it. I don't know. You guys figure it out. You guys are the ones that can quote chapter and verse. The blind. The next person I want you to look at, Mark chapter 1, verse 39. He preached in their synagogue throughout all Galilee and cast out devils. And there came a leper to him, beseeching him, and kneeling down before him, and saying unto him, If thou wilt, thou can make me clean. And Jesus, moved with compassion, put forth his hand and touched him. You didn't touch lepers. Fun fact for you guys. You know what the Torah says about lepers? You keep 6 feet from them. That's the distance. You keep 6 feet from a leper. Does that sound familiar? What's science say today? We have come so far that we say if you get COVID or word about COVID, say 6 feet apart from people. You stayed 6 feet away from a leper. And if the wind was blowing, you would not find anyone that was any kind of Pharisee, Sadducee, anybody that was a religious leader. If the wind was blowing, you wouldn't find him within 100 feet of a leper. They were terrified of leprosy. Now, leprosy had been cured a couple times in the Old Testament. But here this man comes and says, God, if you will. And Jesus doesn't just say, be clean. Jesus walks over and touches the man that probably for years has not felt human contact. None at all. He's lived without human contact. You know, there's a real problem today with isolation and COVID. People are having a real hard time with that. Our mental health facilities, the hospitals may not be as full as they thought they were going to be, but our mental health facilities, they're having problems. You take people and put them in isolation. I've had 2 people lately. Pat, I took a bike ride with him the other day, and Carmen and Joe told me about the show Alone. Take people and you put them alone out in the middle of nowhere. They said the average person lasts like 50 or 60 days alone. And then they just, I'm alone. I don't see anybody else. I don't talk to anybody else. People have a hard time with isolation. The leper's not only isolated, the leper is pushed away and rejected. And Jesus reaches out with his hands and touches the leper. The Bible says immediately, you would have known a leper when you saw him. Covered with sores, covered with lumps. Leprosy cuts off the feeling in your fingers and toes. At a leper colony, they were wondering why it was that people's fingers and toes were falling off. They thought it was, the tissue was dying and falling off. They found out, no, it was rats. Rats chewing on the toes, chewing on the fingers, and the people couldn't feel it. It was rats. Leprosy is still a real thing. There's still a leper colony in the world today. In fact, there was a missionary that was at a leper colony, and he, to be like Jesus, lived among the lepers and ministered to them. And one day he was making tea, and he grabbed the tea kettle off the stove, and he spilt the boiling water on his leg, and didn't realize his leg was burnt, and in that moment he realized that he had contracted leprosy. It was Sunday afternoon, and Sunday evening he got up to speak. And on that Sunday evening he said, for years I've been speaking to you lepers as your pastor. Today I speak to you as one of you. And stayed there and finished his ministry among the lepers. He didn't care that he'd caught it, other than it made his life more difficult, but his life was for them. And here Jesus reaches out to the leper, and he's cured immediately. And then Jesus said, don't tell anybody else, because if you do, I'm going to be overwhelmed with people looking for healing. He said, don't tell anybody else. But verse 45 says, but he went out and began to publish it much, and to blaze abroad the matter. I'm healed! I was a leper. Look at how clean that skin looks. Look at how smooth. I don't use any lotion or conditioner. Look at this. He healed me. And it said Jesus could no more openly enter into the city, but was without in desert places, and they came to him from every quarter. Jesus touched the untouchable, and the cleansing was immediate. He couldn't help but tell others what Christ had done for him. And that's supposed to be what we do as Christians, as believers, tell other people. Just as he was a leper on the outside, we were sinners on the inside. Just as filthy, just as dirty, just as unclean, and he's cleansed us, and we should tell people about that. People were so excited to see Jesus that he couldn't enter into the city. They were so excited to see him. He couldn't go anywhere because the crowds wanted to see him. He healed the blind, he healed the leper, and then Mark chapter 5. Mark chapter 5 is a double header. Mark chapter 5, verse 25. Then came a certain woman, which had an issue of blood 12 years, and had suffered many things of many physicians, and had spent all that she had, and was nothing bettered, but rather grew worse. The Torah, the law, has something like 67 different cures that they try. when this situation arises. She's been through that, and she's been through the secular physicians. It says she has suffered what she's gone through. Remember, there was a time in America where the height of medicine was to put leeches on you and bleed you. Take the bad blood out. Take the bad blood out. She suffered. When she heard of Jesus, came and pressed behind and touched his garment. He didn't touch her, she touched him. For she said, if I but touch his clothes, I shall be whole. Straightway the fountain of blood was dried up, and she felt in her body that she was healed of the plague. And Jesus, immediately knowing in himself that virtue had gone out of him, turned him about in the press, and said, who touched my clothes? And his disciples said unto him, thou seest the multitude thronging thee, and sayest thou, who touched me? Come on, everybody's touching you, Lord. And he looked round about to see her that had done this thing. But the woman, fearing and trembling, knowing what was done in her, came and fell down before him, and told him all the truth. And he said unto her, daughter, thy faith has made thee whole. Go in peace, and be whole of thy plague. And while he yet spake, here's the double header, there came from the ruler of the synagogue's house certain which said, thy daughter is dead. Why troublest thou the master any further? As soon as Jesus heard the word that he had spoken, he saith unto the ruler of the synagogue, be not afraid, only believe. And so here's the ruler of the synagogue. His daughter is dying. And he's trying to get to Jesus because he knows Jesus can heal his daughter. And as he's walking up to talk to Jesus, this woman grabs the hem of his garment and interrupts his plans. My daughter's dear to me. I want my daughter to live. I want Jesus to come and heal her. But what's this woman talking about? Who cares what she says? There's a rule in the synagogue, and women aren't quite as important as men in their society. And so she's talking, and no sooner does Jesus finish with her than someone comes from the house and tells him, it's too late, your daughter's dead. Come home, help us do the preparations. Leave Jesus alone. He can't help. Jesus hears and he says, have faith. Have faith. Don't give up. Have faith. What does it say that he did? Put my glasses. There they are. Verse 36, as soon as Jesus heard the word that was spoken, he saith unto the ruler of the synagogue, be not afraid, only believe. And he suffered no man to follow him, save Peter and James and John, the brother of James. So he takes 3 of his apostles with him. And he comes to the house of the ruler of the synagogue and sees the tumult, and then wept and wailed greatly. He was a great man. He was a ruler in the synagogue. There would have been probably hundreds of people there mourning the loss of his daughter. His daughter's only 12 years old. And when he was come in, he saith unto them, why make ye this to do and weep? The damsel's not dead, but she sleeps. And they laughed him to scorn. But when he had put them all out, don't ever forget that, Jesus was able to clear a room. He takes the father and mother of the damsel and them that were with him, and enters in where the damsel was lying. And he took the damsel by the hand, and said unto her, Talitha cumi, which is being interpreted, damsel, I say unto thee, arise. Straightway the damsel arose and walked, for she was of the age of 12 years, and they were astonished with great astonishment. And he charged them straitly that no man should know it, and commanded that something should be given her to eat. I want you to see that not only did Jesus heal the blind, not only did Jesus heal the lepers, Jesus healed the unclean. The woman that came in the press of people, if the people knew what her problem was, they would have thrown her out and they would have beaten her. Because an issue of blood made her unclean, and the fact that it was ongoing was even worse. She should not have been out in public in that crowd. She was unclean. But she knew. She was willing to risk everything. She could have been stoned for this. She was willing to risk everything to touch the hem of his garment, and Jesus wasn't afraid of an unclean person taking from him the cleanness, the cleanliness, the purity that they need. Listening to Rabbi Zacharias this week, he says, if someone says, I try to live a pure life, or so-and-so lives a pure life, what do we think? Someone makes a commitment to purity. What do we think of? Are they doing something or not doing something? They're not doing something, right? They're pure, not doing something. You can't say purity is a presence. Purity is an absence of contaminants, except for Jesus. Jesus is purity. He himself possesses that, and he alone. And he alone can make us pure. As he took this dead girl, when someone dies, they are unclean under the law. The people that were there crying had been there. They were already going to have to go through the process of ceremonially cleansing themselves. But Jesus was clean. He hadn't been around a dead body. Yet he walks in and touches that's unclean. Those beautiful hands, those wonderful calloused hands, Those strong and mighty hands that created all that is and that built beautiful things in the carpenter shop with his Father, those beautiful hands reached out to the unclean and made them pure and clean, brought back to life. See, we think of life and the world. The world wants us to think that you need to do these things to be happy and make yourself unclean, because the only way to be happy is to have a little bit of uncleanness in you. Yet if we understood the purity of Jesus Christ and what that really means, we would seek it. We would hunger for it. Jesus did the undoable. He brought hope to the hopeless. Finally, those hands that created all that is, those hands that reached out and made a blind man see for the first time in history, those hands that were willing to touch the leper, those hands that were willing to touch the unclean. John chapter 20, verse 24. But Thomas, one of the 12, called Didymus, was not with them when Jesus came. The other disciples therefore said unto him, We have seen the Lord. But he said unto them, Except I shall see in his hands the print of the nails, and the print of and put my finger into the print of the nails, and thrust my hand into his side, I will not believe. And after 8 days again his disciples were within, and Thomas with them. Then came Jesus, the doors being shut, and stood in the midst, and said, Peace be unto you. Then saith he to Thomas, Reach hither thy finger, and behold my hands. Reach hither thy hand, and thrust it into my side, and be not faithless, but believing. Those hands that created all that is. Those hands that were so wonderful in healing, so kind and merciful. Those hands were nailed to a rough cross to bear our sins for us. Someone put together a little picture series. And there's a man standing there, and his garments are filthy, they're spotted. And here comes Jesus in white garments carrying the cross. In the next frame, he stops and looks at the man. And in the next frame, Jesus sets the cross down and reaches around. And in the next frame, the man is wearing the man's filthy garments, and the man is wearing Jesus' white clothing. And Jesus picks up his cross and goes on, and the man stands there amazed. Amazed. I'm clean. I'm clean because of Jesus on the cross. I'm clean. Jesus hangs there and dies. Ridiculed. As a common criminal, he's treated. The creator of all that is dies in his creation. The one without time knows what it means to end a life. There he is dying. But he didn't stay dead. Those hands, those wonderful, powerful hands, those hands came back again and offered to Thomas as proof, yes, I did die for you. I don't know if you realize this or not, but this is after the resurrection of Christ. Those nail prints in his hands are still there today. He could have healed himself, but he didn't. There's an eternal reminder of what he did for us. And in heaven, every day we see him, every time he reaches out to us, we're going to be reminded of his love for us because of those hands. Those hands. There's a permanent record and reminder of what he did to purchase our salvation. He wants to prove to all of us that he is real. He's real. We have a special blessing today because we haven't seen him face to face. He says, Thomas, you're blessed because you've seen. Blessed are those who believe without seeing. We have a special blessing. Do you guys know that? We have a special blessing. We're going to get to heaven one day, and the apostles, we're going to have a blessing they don't have because we've seen him. Those same hands are preparing a place for us today. Now, I said before, I don't think Jesus is up there doing carpentry and, he's not building tables and stuff, but I'm pretty sure as he walks through the mansions, he's prepared for us. He says, this is the one I made for Jeff. I think you'll enjoy this counter. I think the door, I saw the door that Bonnie decorated at the parsonage. I think she's really going to like this door because this door doesn't just have a glass seahorse on it. It's full of seahorses. Really, I don't know what he's doing. But those hands are there, walking through what he's prepared for us. Those hands are waiting to welcome us home. What do you do when you see a little kid? You folks that have grandkids and you folks that have younger kids, when they come over, they've been away for a while, what do? You do this, right? You do this. And what does a kid do? They run into your arms. They should, if they love you. And there's Jesus, those nail-pierced hands reaching out for us. Those beautiful hands, those hands of creation wait to welcome us home. Who am I that you're mindful of me? Who am I you're waiting for me and calling me home? Those same hands around the globe today are knocking on heart's doors. Will you open and let me in? Those same hands. God who created everything, God who wiped out, this morning we were talking about the Assyrian army. And Judah was going to make a covenant with Egypt. Protect us from Assyria. Protect us from the Assyrians. And God said, you are sinning twice. Number one, not trusting me. And number two, seeking help from someone else. I will take care of you. I will provide for you. And one night, the Assyrians coming to fight against Judah, take them captive and burn the city. Here they come. And one night, the Assyrians lie down to sleep. And the next morning, 185,000 of them don't wake up because the hand of God struck them dead. Those hands hung on the cross for you and I. They bore the nails for us. Those hands are waiting to welcome us home. And those same hands are going around knocking. Not pounding on the door, but knocking. Will you let me in? Will you let me in? Behold, I stand at the door and knock. If any man hear my knock, or hear my voice, and open the door, I will come into him and will sup with him and he with me. Those wonderful hands. As we think about Labor Day, I am so happy that we're working and we have income. I am so happy for you folks. That's an answer to prayer. That God's taking care of us, meeting our needs. I am so happy. I couldn't be more thrilled with what God has done. I'm so happy He's keeping us healthy and safe. There are churches around the state that have people that are sick today. Okay, right? We have some folks that are sick, but not COVID. Thank God for that. Thank God for the testimony that we've had. Thank God for the souls that have been saved. Thank God for the reputation we have. But I thank God for the work that He's done for us. And that when you and I work with our hands, we're not working just for a paycheck, not just for ourselves, not just for an employer. We're working for Him. He who works so hard for us. Father, I do thank you for Jesus Christ. I thank you for those beautiful hands. I thank you for the fact that that hand, one day I was 13 years old, 12 years old, in a chapel service, and that hand reached down to me and invited me home. I'm so glad I reached out and took that hand. My life's not been the same since. Lord, that's been 46 years ago. 46 years I've walked with you. And every step has drawn me closer to you. Even when I wanted to run away, even when I was backslidden, you used that in my life to teach me and to train me. Lord, there's nothing that's ever come into my life that you haven't allowed, nothing that's ever come into my life that hasn't made me stronger because of the work of Jesus Christ. Thank you for Him. Lord, if there is anyone here today that doesn't know Him, Jesus is knocking on their heart's door today. Today would be a great day to open the door and let Him in. Lord, it doesn't just say that He's going to come in and give us some pamphlets. He's not just going to come in and talk to us. It says, I'm going to sit down and have a meal with you. I'm going to come and fellowship with you. I want to get to know you better, and I want you to get to know me better. Thank you for that opportunity. Lord, just thank you for what you've done. Thank you for your kindness, your love. And thank you, Lord. One day we get to heaven. I look forward to feeling that nail-pierced hand on my head. I hope to hear, well done. Lord, I just look forward to running into your arms, to knowing you as you know me. Bless us, take us home safely. Give us opportunity to serve this week, we pray. In Jesus' name.